Dig that trig. Use what you've learned about trig ratios to answer each question. Number 1, let's match each trig ratio with the appropriate abbreviation. Sine, drop the E. Sine goes with G. Tangent, tan, not gent. H. And I'm going to pause here for a minute and acknowledge, you do the rest. I'm not going to talk about it. I'm just going to give you the answers in 30 seconds. Okay? You should pause. You should answer all of question 1. See what you remember, and then see if your answer matches mine. I mean, that's what they are, right? That's how you abbreviate them. These are the words you say. This is the math that you write, and there you have it. Match each trig ratio. This is number 2 now. For all of you that are joining back in, we're on number 2. Match each trig ratio with the appropriate description. Sine is... Actually, right now, I'm not going to answer any of them. I'll answer them after you pause the video, and then you answer them, and then come back and check, okay? So, pause and check. Here I go. Hey, let's talk about this ask yourself over here on the side. And I want you to go search that up, right? So, hey Siri, what's a mnemonic for knowing trig ratios?
Okay, I found this on the web for what's the mnemonic for knowing trig ratios. Check it out.
Search one up. I'll tell you one in class. What's a mnemonic for knowing your trig ratios? Sine, cosine, tangent. Cosecant, secant, and cotangent. What is that going to be? Okay, ask me about it though. I'll tell you in class. Last question, number 3. Given the known information and the solution requirement, identify which trig ratio you can use to solve each equation. Ready? I'm going to answer this one same way I did question 1 and 2 in a review format. Pause, skip forward, but before you skip forward, answer them yourself. See if you really know what you're talking about. Okay, so you're skipping forward. Here I go. I'm going to talk to hypotenuse, opposite, measure of the reference angle. We know it. We have to find the measure of the reference angle. We could use cosecant inverse of hypotenuse and opposite, or we could use sine inverse of opposite over hypotenuse. Those are equal. Okay, we know the opposite, and we know the acute angle. We need to find the hypotenuse. We could use sine of the angle. Oh, okay, hold up a second here. So I need to write this one on the side. Sine of the angle. Sine is opposite over hypotenuse. So then the hypotenuse would be opposite over sine. Yeah, I agree with that. Or similarly, we could say cosecant of the angle is hypotenuse over opposite, which means hypotenuse is opposite times cosecant of the angle. I'm going to go ahead and talk these all out loud. Maybe you skip forward and you're like, I don't know what he's saying. So I'm going to walk through the first 2 and then go back. These are really tricky. I still believe that you should try to do them yourself and then see what I'm saying. In the first one, I know the opposite and the hypotenuse, but I don't know the measure of the reference angle. That means I have to use an inverse. But the opposite and the hypotenuse is a sine or a cosecant ratio. So in this problem, setting up cosecant inverse as h over o, that'll tell me the angle. Or setting up sine inverse of o over h. Remember that they're reciprocals, they flip. So that's going to let me know how to find the measure of the reference angle. In the second one, we know the opposite but we don't know the hypotenuse, so therefore it's not inverse, it's just directly sine of the angle and cosecant of the angle. But we have to solve this equation, or this one, so that we can get the hypotenuse to be by itself. And it turns out the hypotenuse is opposite over sine of A. Next question. We have the hypotenuse. We have the acute angle measurement. We need to find the adjacent side. And to do that, adjacent and hypotenuse is a cosine ratio or a secant ratio. But because we know the reference angle, it's directly going to be a cosine without the inverse. I'm going to write this on scratch paper for a second. So cosine of the angle is adjacent over hypotenuse. And if we want to solve to find the adjacent side, just multiply both sides by the hypotenuse. So the adjacent side will equal hypotenuse times cosine. I'm not going to acknowledge secant in this problem because I saw a bunch of extra collateral happening up here, and I want to minimize that damage. Opposite and adjacent. So opposite and adjacent. The mnemonic for this one is SOHCAHTOA, so TOA is tangent, but we don't know the measure of the reference angle. So the measure of the angle is going to be inverse tangent of the opposite over the adjacent. If you don't know the angle, use inverse. If you know the angle, then just use the sine ratio or the tangent ratio or the cosine ratio. Okay, question 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Hypotenuse is known and the opposite side is known. So opposite and hypotenuse is a sine or a cosecant ratio. And I'm going to go back to work over here. So if I write sine of the angle and it's opposite over hypotenuse, and the thing I want to figure out is the opposite side, then I'm just going to multiply this ratio, both sides multiplied by hypotenuse. That'll get the opposite side to be by itself. So like question 3, question 5 looks similar. Hypotenuse times sine of the angle. Last one. Hypotenuse and the adjacent side. And we want to know the measure of the reference angle. So the measure of angle A, let's see, hypotenuse and adjacent side, thinking SOHCAHTOA, is cosine. So, and also I don't know the angle, so it's cosine inverse of the adjacent divided by the hypotenuse. This was a tricky table, but this is a definitely solid review for you to make sure you understand all of the ratios that are used in sine, cosine, tangent, cosecant, secant, and cotangent. And it's really just the relationship of 3 lines, the hypotenuse line, the opposite line, and the adjacent line. How we use them creates our ratio. You guys, you've done it. You've learned trig. Well, there is more in Algebra 2 and in Pre-Calc Trig to talk about, but thank you for paying attention to lessons 2, 3, and 4 as we talk about tangent, opposite over adjacent, sine, opposite over hypotenuse, and cosine, adjacent over hypotenuse, and the respective relationships to their other cofunctions. Keep doing your homework. Keep asking me for help. We're going to be continuing to put these trig functions, these trig ratios into practice in the next lesson. So I'll see you there. Like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next episode.